These people are often valued participants in the life of congregations as adherents. So that would be the definition of adherence that we are relying on as we consider this proposal. Roz.
Roz Vincent Haven, Emmanuel United Church in Waterloo. I guess
You just muted for some reason, Roz.
Sorry.
Okay.
We heard up to
Right
where
again, Roz Vincent Haven, Emmanuel United in Waterloo. I really like these changes. I think they're good. I guess my question is around majority. We do know that there are factions that would very much like to, and I'm not saying this is about Morrison. It sounds like you have a good definition of adherence. And so if that's being followed by all the congregations in the United Church of Canada, I think there may be no problem with that. But there is a concern around what does majority look like? And so is it like 50%, 51%? Anyway, that's just a question for clarification. Thank you.
I think it says 50%. So a simple majority, I guess, would be 51% technically. Mark.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I can't raise my hand because I'm a co-host. So Executive Minister Mark speaking. Just to help answer one of those questions for clarification as well. What this proposal is saying is it's granting the governing body of the congregation the ability to elect adherents or the community of faith. They still have to elect them. So if someone who has only been attending the church for 1 or 2 weeks says, I want to join, it is up to that congregation to decide whether they want to elect them or not. It's not saying that they're automatically elected. So they would still have to be elected as anyone else would be elected. It's just opening the pool for who can be elected, if that helps.
Thank you, Mark, for that clarification. Are there any other questions for clarification?
Where do you go to? I have a question.
Greta, if you couldn't raise your hand, you spoke and you were unmuted yourself to speak, so I recognize you now. Oh, but now you're muted. So you'll have to unmute again, Greta.
I'm wondering about adherence being on the M&P committee because of the matters that they deal with. Are we talking about adherence being on every committee of the church?
In our congregation, yes. And I believe that our practice has been to, probably some of our best people have been adherents in some ways. At least they have contributed with different perspectives and vision. And certainly in our tiny church, we appreciate the time offered and the thoughtfulness that they give to the position and the confidentiality. Because that's really what MMP needs to be conscious of, as well as the fact they're working in a church setting, that they have the confidentiality is the biggest piece for anybody in that role, I'm sure. But also understanding the law and what is reasonable versus with the contracts and the employment agreements that are in front of them as that committee.
And do we accept people that are members of another church? Like when you spoke, you said that some of yours are whatever, Anglican or Catholic or whatever. So if they're a member of another church,
Yeah.
as well as an adherent.
They're not attending another church. They're living in Glen Morris. They're attending at Glen Morris. They don't attend somewhere else because there are no other choices in Glen Morris, quite frankly. There is us. So they come. And the community is very strong. There's a very strong community support network. And whether they're a member or at another church, if they're living in the village, they have identified with the village first and they call their church Glen Morris United. And that's their minister. When they need a person to come and be with them in a time of pastoral crises, they our minister goes, and they are as accepted as anyone who comes through the door. So.
And
Thank
when
you.
we vote on this, that would be for the whole of WOW. Is that right?
So I can answer that. Sorry, this is Executive Minister Mark. President Jennifer's computer just froze. And so she's sitting next to me, but does not have access. So can't hear. So I have just quickly jumped in. So what we're voting on is for all of these next three proposals is if Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council agrees with it, we are then passing it on to the General Council for them to then have the discussion to whether they will enact it or not. So if we vote yes, that does not mean that it automatically happens in all of Western Ontario Waterways. We vote, if we vote yes, that means we're passing it on to General Council to have General Council talk about whether they think that this it should be these changes should be made. So I hope that helps. Anne, I think you were able to answer some of the questions too. I saw your hand go up as one question was asked.
I can. Couple of things. We need to remember that the manual defines the right now is talking about members of the governing body, and that's what this proposal is addressing. So right now, if you want an adherent to be a member of your governing body, you need to get permission from the Congregational Support Commission for that member to sit on your governing body. We're not talking about the committees of the church. We're only talking about the governing body. You can have non-members, adherents on any of your committees, but they can't, at the moment, they can't sit on the governing body without permission from the region. So this is only addressing the governing body, not all of your committees. Your own governing body and congregation will set up the structure of how you govern your church. And if you say that all members of all committees are on your governing body, then yes, currently today they would need to be members. But most churches would say that the chair, for example, or a representative from each of these committees will sit on the governing body. Those are the people we're talking about right now. The ones who sit on the governing body, not members of every committee.
So I either need
Thank you,
someone
Anne.
else's.
So thank you for that, Anne. President Jennifer's computer has completely died. So prayers for President Jennifer's computer. We are going to move President. Well, for right now, we're going to move President Jennifer to Terry's computer. I'm volunteering our chair of agenda business, Terry, to give up his spot, and she will go over there. But in the meantime, are there any other questions for clarification? Again, questions that help you understand what it is we're voting on with this proposal. Okay, I'm not seeing any. And so we now would move into a time for if anyone has any suggestions for this proposal to improve it without changing the ethos of what it is asking. And President Jennifer, let me know when you are. I think we're going to change their name on Terry's computer and we'll get them back in here again.
Okay, so sorry about that. Now I have a different background. That's exciting. Okay. Yeah, I see no hands up, so I'll ask for a mover for this motion, Lynn McCruer, and someone to second the motion, Anne Harbridge. Thank you for raising your hand so quickly. I thought it might be you too, so I appreciate that. So at this point, we have a mover and a seconder, and we can open the floor for any formal debate that you would like to speak to this motion. During this time of formal debate, the person who moves the proposal could speak to it as Lynn has already spoken to it. Then each person can speak to the proposal one time. And I will be keeping you to a strict time limit. And then at the end of, if any debate happens, Lynn, you'll have a chance to speak again before we call for the vote. I'm going to ask that people keep their comments to 1 minute. Anne?
So I just want to say how strongly I support this motion. And the reason being, we currently get the occasional request from the Congregational Support Commission to approve non-members to the governing bodies. I know for a fact that there are many governing bodies out there that are appointing non-members to their governing body and not seeking permission. I know it for a fact. We leave ourselves open, and your congregation leaves itself open to some liability in doing that, because you're not following the manual and the policies of the United Church. So that's why I strongly support this motion.
Thank you, Anne. I'll recognize Peter.
Peter Challenge, Huron Shores United Church. Him. I strongly support this motion. I suggest that our church is moving from a position of being more restrictive in all our activities to a position of being less restrictive. Our affirming ideas, Huron Shores United Church is open and affirming. That's just one. Our recognition of our part in the residential school fiasco, that's another. The hymn that we've sang this morning, Open Wide, this is another in those ideas that our strength is in being less restrictive. So I support this motion, and I encourage all of us to. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was just in time.
Very
Excellent, Peter. Thank you so much. Mark.
Hi there, Margaret Ruggles, Morriston United Church ministry personnel. I don't want to speak in favor or against the motion at this point. I do want to raise my concern about how this motion, motion may affect ministry personnel in their serving positions. So I haven't heard a lot of conversation about if there was a conflict, for instance, in the congregation between the ministry personnel and council was involved in that process. How having non-members of the church making decisions regarding ministry personnel would happen. So I'm just simply raising my concern about that.
Thank you, Mark. Judy.
Hi, excuse me. I am in favor. As Mark said, we're just sending it on to be looked at again. So I don't think we should say no to it. I also believe that United Church is very progressive. We need to accept everybody, and I know we do in my church. And as our membership gets less, we don't have the people to do the work. And if there's people that want to be part of our congregational board, I mean, we don't have to elect them. We could say no. But I think it's something that the wider church should look at to see if this is the direction they want to go, rather than just say no.
Thank you for that. Okay, seeing no other hands up. I'm gonna remind everybody. Actually, I'm gonna recognize. Sorry, Therese, I see you put your hand up, but I also just want to remind myself that once Therese has spoken, if no one else has put up their hand in that 1 minute time that she has, that I'm gonna let this be spoken to once more by the mover. Therese.
Hi, yeah, I am speaking as ministry personnel and personally, not in an official capacity, but I just wonder, I don't know how I would vote on this, and the vote's coming soon. I wonder to what extent this is grounded in a deep understanding of who we are um, as Christians gathering together. And I wonder to what extent it's grounded in fear about us not being who we once were and trying to keep what once was going forward. Um, I hear a little bit of both of those, and I'm wondering sort of how much of each it is. And I will be praying to decide how to vote.
Thanks, Therese. I'll recognize Jen, who managed to get her hand up in that 1 minute.
Jen McComb, or sorry, Jen Westbrook. She, her from, I am from Glen Morris. One thing to consider about this is not every church does this apply to, or is this something that you need? But there are a lot of churches, ours included, that this is something we really could use. So by allowing the general council to vote on this, it would allow churches like ours to open it up to adherents. If that doesn't work for your government or your community, then that's fine. Your community doesn't have to take that up, but please allow the churches that really could benefit from this to use it.
Thank you, Jen. So wondering, Lynn, if you wanted to say anything else before we call for the vote.
It sounds to me like there's support, there's concerns. Please know that at Glen Morris, we certainly have prayed for direction as to how to go forward and spent time considering this, valuing all the people who are part of our community now and have been part and are going forward as part of community. So I think for us, this is a move that is, as you said, President Jen, the liability issue that Anne brought up, it protects us a little bit more as a smaller community. But it is also living our faith, which is come in when you can, as you are. And we have no idea if folks will want to join us in the future and be a full member. We're certainly not about sending them away when they've proven that they believe in what we're doing and are supportive and willing to take up the roles that we all take up in the church. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. So what we will be voting on is in support of the recommendation of the official board of Glen Morris United Church that General Council revise the manual bylaw B731 as follows. The governing body has the following members: the full members of the congregation elected by the congregation or pastoral charge changed to read the full members and adherents of the congregation elected by the congregation or pastoral charge, with the majority being full members of the congregation. B, C, D, E would remain unchanged, and then the exception clause would be changed to read exception in special circumstances with the regional council's approval. There is one exception to the requirement in paragraphs A and E above for governing body members to be full members of the congregation. If a congregation wants to name a governing body with less than 50% as full members, they must seek general council approval. So we would be voting to support this proposal. Okay, McCall, did you want to speak just before we vote?
Yeah, I think one piece that was slightly named, but I wouldn't want it to get lost, is that when the definition of adherence was read, an adherent is sometimes we use it very casually in the church as anyone who's there, but an adherent, churches have adherent lists. So when a congregation, for example, is having a governing body meeting, or a congregational meeting, to change the pastoral relationship, they need to have an adherent list present. So that's just a piece of clarity, because I heard people asking about, is it anyone who's there? The governing body, the church has an adherent list. They're not full members, but they are not just people who show up that Sunday either.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for the question. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. That proposal is approved. So that will be automatically transmitted to the General Council for their consideration. And I misspoke earlier when I was reading and said General Council instead of Regional Council for approval. So congregations, you will not have to go to General Council to get approval for if this passes at the General Council level. So thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Lynn and Anne, for presenting that. Okay, we are ready now to move on to the Proposal 7 to General Council. Thank you. And I believe Harry Disher is going to speak on this one. It regards proxy voting, and it's found on pages 32 and 33 of your workbook. Go ahead, Harry.
Okay, so I'm serving at Lakeshore United in Goderich, who last October had finished their process to become an affirming congregation, and had a congregational meeting where they voted in favor of that, about 90%. The issue was that a number of our persons were ill at the time, or going to be away at the time. And if you know anything about the affirming process that you follow to become an affirming, it's a good 1.5 to 2 years of discussions, presentations, talking circles, open meetings, so that people are well informed of what's at stake or what's before them. And then there's a mission statement that's prepared and sent out. Everyone can see it, everyone can read it. That's what gets approved, in addition to agreeing to pay the membership fee to be part of Affirm United. So there were just a few number of people upset, including the co-chair of the affirming committee, who couldn't be there that day. So we think that there are some circumstances when there's a congregational meeting, given that there's been plenty of discussion, the information disseminated ahead of time, that on those decisions, you can allow for advance polls, proxy votes, and other means of having your voice heard, rather than having to be present if that's not going to be possible for you.
Okay, thank you, Harry. So just in terms of, before we open the floor to discussion, yeah, 2 questions for clarification. What exactly will your proposal ask General Council to consider, Harry?
We would add an amending clause to section B.5.6 that would allow for those forms of voting in certain circumstances, such as becoming an affirming congregation, provided sufficient information and discussion has happened ahead of time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Just to clarify. So now I'll open the floor for questions or clarification aside from mine. I'll recognize Yuni.
Okay, I have one question, Harry. There are a lot of the device developed. We can use the Zoom. You can have any device. So that person cannot attend to make a statement or to show their decision. I think this time is really developed. So everybody, even the South Africa, in Korea, anywhere, they can join the meeting, and then they can approve their they can say that their own opinion very clearly.
If I can respond, not everyone, particularly some of our shut-ins, are familiar with computers and have them and have access to them and know how to use them. Some of our people in retirement homes and have mobility issues. They may not have access to that technology, but they would be able to have someone visit them and receive their vote. And in small rural communities, there are some of them, there is no, the more remote you are, the harder it is to have access through technology to be around to make decisions by online. So.
Thanks, Harry. And thanks, Uni, for that question. Mary, I'll recognize you.
I certainly see the benefit of this. However, I would like to see somewhere in the motion where it says that those who are given the opportunity to have a proxy vote should have attended at least 50% of the meetings that provided the information.
Okay, so when we get to a little bit further along in the process for changes or additions, Mary, that's where that would come in. So can we try to remember that forward when we get there? Are there any other questions for clarification? I'll recognize Alex.
Hi there, Alex Jepson, he, him, Blythe and Brussels United Churches. This is kind of along the lines, but before we get into that discussion, I was wondering, Harry, if you might have some idea. Was there any kind of idea on what kind of constitutes sufficient time and discussion given to a certain topic? Did you have any kind of benchmarks in mind when coming up with this proposal?
We didn't. In a sense, those are like emendations that I think the general council would have to make. It's up to them to decide what they can, if they can define sufficient. Certainly the affirming process, I would think, because it's a 1.5 to 2 year process, certainly there'll be one instance for sure that would meet that criteria in my estimation. I suspect possibly a living faith story that's been circulated and generated by a congregation before they go into search mode. That could be another possibility. And then there are other matters that probably you do need to be present when you're making some significant decisions at congregational meeting. But I think there are some exceptions where you don't necessarily have to be present. You do have to have your name on the list, right? So we had a list of adherents and members and ticked off who we actually did have advanced polls. We just weren't allowed to count those votes.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you. I'll recognize Crystal.
Crystal McGee, First United Church in Owen Sound. Harry, deeply appreciate the intent of inclusion and sharing wisdom. My question is, how does the Holy Spirit participate in this, in that we've experienced lots of transformation and change of heart and different insight with the dynamic of an actual meeting? And I'm not going to put restrictions on the Spirit. I think she works wonders, but just wondering about that, people trusting themselves to vote ahead of time or sending a proxy without being a part of that experience where we do trust the Spirit to help us to discern and decide.
The people who were most upset felt that the Holy Spirit had moved them to vote in a certain way on this issue, and they just felt really hurt that they could not participate and have their say on something that mattered very deeply to them spiritually, in terms of the ongoing work and moving forward in this congregation. So we believe that the Spirit also works, had done sufficient work, certainly this time ahead of time, and was still present that day.
Okay, I don't see any more questions for clarification. So I'm going to invite a time for additions or changes, that don't change the spirit of the motion. And so I'll go back to, I'll start with Mary's comment. Harry, did you have a response to that? Her suggestion that the sufficient discussion and conversation ahead of time, and that those who wish to vote had been present, like that it was documented they were present for 50% of that or something like that.
Yeah, she wanted people to be present at 50% of the preceding discussion, conversation. I think that could possibly be there. I'm not sure how you monitor that. And we certainly, when it comes to voting, we have a list. I'm not sure we take attendance at all the discussion meetings, but certainly it's unlikely certainly in the situation we were in, that everybody would have had at least 50% participation in that discussion over that particular choice of becoming an affirming congregation. So again, that would be something General Council might want to add. We didn't want to limit it at this point.
I'll recognize Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Just kind of to further get my microphone on here, sorry. Colin Snyder, he, him, ministry personnel for Wingham United Church and Knox United Church, Belgrave, and member of the Congregational Support Commission. The same technological issues that avoid these people being able to vote also avoid them being part of the meetings or attending the meetings where a lot of this stuff is discussed. So this kind of this puts an emphasis on the congregation to also be creative in how to keep these people informed about all the discussions and that are going on, that they're not just voting without being part of the process. I'm not sure that's expressed in the motion, but I think a responsible congregation needs to be aware of that these people need to be kept part of the process along the way.
Okay, so sort of speaking to or against that addition, like, and we're not, just to remind people, this isn't the debate portion of whether we are going to pass this proposal on or whether we're going to pass this proposal, and then it will go to General Council. This is just the portion where we're deciding, are we going to add anything? Do we feel like there are any changes that could be made to this to make it stronger if we were going to approve it? That makes sense.
I'm not suggesting any additions.
Okay.
So,
okay,
yeah.
Thanks, Colin. We'll remember what you've said when we get to the official debate portion. I'm going to recognize David Shearman now.
Thank you. Thank you, President Jennifer. Mr. David Shearman, Ministry Personnel, he, him, also chair of the HR Commission. One of the things, and I wonder, Harry, if you had raised this, I have seen situations where most congregational meetings have been stacked, packed, whatever. And my concern is that matters of the pastoral relationship would you consider that as an amendment, that the words excluding matters of the pastoral relationship from this proposal, simply because those are HR issues, human resources issues. I think they deserve a whole lot more than a popular vote. So would you consider that as an amendment?
I think what we're saying is exactly the opposite, that there are certain matters that would be protected by the manual, and that would be one of them, where you would have to be present. We're just wanting to list some circumstances where it wouldn't be necessary to be present. but they could certainly, I mean, so they would have to list, they would have to define what the special circumstances were and the occasions that could merit voting without having to be present at the time.
Thank you. I guess I would find it a whole lot easier to support this if those specifics had been included. I think that this is a matter, this is how we are as a church, and I take Crystal's comments very seriously. And especially in matters of the pastoral relationship and other equally important congregational votes. So thank you for the clarification.
So I'm just wondering if we can just add in, just to be totally clear, even though it is stated in the manual, at the end of the bold part on page 33, saying excluding matters of pastoral relationship. Doesn't change the intent of your.
Well, I mean, I think you'd also exclude things like disbanding the congregation and selling the property. It's a
There's a lot of things we would exclude. Yeah, you make a good point.
There are other
Just to be
circumstances
clear,
that aren't major like that might
yes,
qualify for voting in a different manner.
Fair enough. Kathy.
Kathy Larman, Clinton United Church, goes by she and her. I'm on the HR Commission and is the HR Commission's representative on the executive. I have a concern with the idea of saying that in order for someone who wasn't there, they have to have been a part of the discussions for a certain amount of time beforehand, because we don't put that same thing on someone who is actually sitting there waiting to vote. I think that we have to leave it up to the goodwill of, if we're going to do this, then the congregation knows who has been a part of the discussions and who has not. And the theory is you could have a whole bunch of people actually come that had never been at any of the previous discussions, they're members, and they could vote. Trying to say you have to be there beforehand doesn't work all that well for me. I think that we have to trust that the congregations know who they're going to allow to vote if we allow them this kind of proxy or an advance or whatever. I just don't, it's the amendment that would say that they have to have been there for a certain amount of education beforehand that I have a concern with.
Right. And I thought we had landed on letting the general counsel suss that out for themselves, whether that would be something they would want to add on rather than make it part of what we need to
I'm just saying,
approve today.
I don't think that would be a good addition for them to add something like that.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Anne
Harbridge, Chair of Congregational Support Commission. I am against this proposal because I need more clarity. To leave it.
Sorry, Anne, let me just stop you there because we're not debating this right now. We haven't even made the motion.
Sorry.
We're just chatting around, like, is this the motion we want to make? Okay. So I'll just get you to hold on for 1 second, because you were the last hand up around, like, do we make additions? Do we don't make it? Do we make any changes? And I see Robert put his hand up. You have something around additions or changes, Robert?
Actually, I would
yes.
suggest, it's Robert Lawson, he, him, St. Mary's United Church. I would suggest we just leave it the way it is, because this is part of an ongoing discussion. The United Church has been looking at general council level about what members actually are. It's part of a larger discussion. You know that when we count people in church on Sunday now, we don't count members when we used to. Now we just count who's present. And I think that if we support this and send it through to general council, there needs to be more discussion on what a member is, what an adherent is, and this will just keep that conversation going.
Okay,
I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Okay, so I'm going to call for this motion to be for a mover, Harry. And is there someone who would like to second this proposal? Oh, great. Tina, thank you. Tina Oteka, Oteka, is going to second that motion. Okay, so now I'm going to start the official debate with inviting Harry to speak again to this motion if he wishes to say something more than he's already said in his introduction of it.
No, I wait to hear what Anne has to say and then see if I got a rebuttal that works.
All right, so the way the debate will work is that I will give each person that wishes to speak to this motion a minute to say what they would like to say, and that each person can only speak once. And at the end of every one, if Harry would like to rebut anything that is said before we vote, that is his prerogative. So I'm going to recognize Anne first and invite you to speak.
Thanks, President Jennifer. I started to say I would vote, Ann Harbridge, Chair of the Congregational Support Commission. I can't support this motion. There's just too much ambiguity in it. I need much more clarity about the kinds of things that we would allow proxy voting on and the kinds of things we would not. For sure, pastoral relations issues, disbandments, amalgamations, all of those big congregational decisions. I can't see proxy voting being a good way to go in any of this. So.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Okay. Oh, that changed the order of people with their hands up for me, but I see in my list, Roz is next.
I am not sure. Roz Vincent Haven, member of Congregational Support Commission, and I guess adherent at Emmanuel United Church in Waterloo. And I was struggling about whether I should put my hand down because I think that Anne has sort of spoken for me. I can't perceive what an exception would be of a special circumstance. I think that becoming an affirming congregation is really important. I don't see it as being less than a change in pastoral relationship. So I would have to vote against this. Thank you.
Thanks, Roz. Judy.
So Judy Cerubic, she, her Kincardine United Church. I also have concerns about the possibility of abuse in going around and getting proxy votes. There is no way to be able to say whether, especially if you're going through retirement homes gathering votes, that the people would be influenced to vote a certain way instead of being there in person, either by Zoom or phone call, or, I mean, people may not be able to do Zoom, and there is some issues with confidentiality, but phones work as well, and even our elderly know how to use phones. So I would not support this either.
Thank you, Judy. That was just in time. Therese.
Therese Samuel, Ministry Personnel. I am, I use the affirming flag as a way for me to know that it's safe for me to go to a community. And knowing that there's a possibility that people who voted who aren't going to be present there made the affirming process go through makes me feel a bit less sure of the affirming process. I think it's important to find a way to have a voice for everybody, but I want to know that the people who are going to be there on a Sunday are creating a safe environment for me and my spouse and other members of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community. So I'm not, at this moment, I'm not leaning to vote in favor. I'm leaning to vote against. Thank you.
Thanks, Therese. Tina.
Yes, hello, I'm Tina Otika with She, Her, and I am a member of the Lakeshore United Church where this is coming from. And I guess for me, what was written was pretty clear because it says at the congregational meetings where the issue to be decided has had a sufficient amount of discussion and conversation ahead of time, ahead of the meeting. For me, I guess that makes it clear enough that it's not every issue that comes by here and there. I know that those people who had voted ahead of time, some of them had to work. And if you're at work, you can't say, oh, excuse me, I'm going to go get on the computer while I'm working so I can vote on a matter. I do just find it very inclusive. I think it's clear enough, at least for my understanding, that it's not every single issue that is to be voted on. And it was very hurtful for people who had spent a lot of time on this issue and then their vote could not be counted. So perhaps we could just have some faith in the people who are voting and some faith if people are being proxies.
Thanks, Tina. I appreciate. Yep. Neil.
Oh, Tina, you cut me to the core. I would
Sorry.
love to have.
Could you introduce yourself, Neil?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I did before. And Neil Parker, Vienna Community Church. He, him. And Tina, you just triggered me. I would love and I want to have faith in the folks that are voting. And I also know that I do work for the Office of Vocation dealing with irregularities. And this is a prime opportunity to create opportunities for me to do contract work when people gather folks to do proxy voting. So I am torn. Judy had mentioned the concern about misuse, and that is unfortunately one of the places I want to go. People need to be present. There are ways to do that. If people can't figure out how to use a cell phone, an elder in our system can attend with a person and hold a phone. That's how people talk to their great-grandchildren. That's how people can vote on something. We can solve the tech. That's not a problem. But people need to be face-to-face involved in making important decisions.
Thank you, Neil.
Because of the potential for abuse. Done.
Yeah, thanks so much. Peter.
Does not work, I think.
Sorry, Peter, you're muted.
Oh, keep forgetting it. Peter Kupfer, member of the Community Support Commission. And I cannot support this motion as I feel, like many of you, that there's not enough here to go for proxy voting. Thank you.
Okay, and I just want to remind you, we've got 3 people whose hands are up right now. Those are the people I'm going to recognize, and then we'll call for the vote. Oh, yeah, sorry, Harry, we'll talk again. Yeah, fine. Don't worry, Harry.
Harry always gets the last word. Yeah, Colin Snyder, he, him, Wingham United Church and Knox United Church, Belgrave ministry personnel, member of the Congregational Support Commission. We spend an awful lot of time talking about inclusion and how we want to make everybody included and feel included. And I think we're on the cusp here of excluding people who don't aren't part of a certain technological age, people who have spent their entire lives supporting their church. And I just support this commission or this motion because I hate to see those people excluded. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Beth.
Beth Kerr, serving the communities of Trinity, Listowel, and Atwood, she, her. I have seen the Holy Spirit work in meetings so many times, and I actually think it's much easier. I've had this conversation many times to say, we don't do proxy voting in the United Church of Canada on anything because we believe in the power of the Holy Spirit in the gathered community, and to invite people to trust the rest of their community to vote if they're not able to be present on the day in which the voting has taken place. And they can feed in statements of why they think, like they can feed in information, but they can't vote if they're not there. And I think it complicates things if we have certain scenarios where you can vote and not present and other scenarios where you can't vote when you're not present. I think the simplest thing is no, we believe in the Holy Spirit. You can't vote if you're not there.
Thanks, Beth. And now Shirley.
Yes, I just want to say that I would have to vote against this. I have a problem with proxy voting in any group that I've ever been involved with. And I think if you're not part of the discussion and hear it, it is very difficult to vote. You could change your mind because you've been part of that group. Thank you.
Okay. Sue, did you have something different that you wanted to say? I said I was just going to recognize those 3 people that already had their hands up. So unless you have something that speaks to the way we're going to vote or.
Yes, I did have one thing that was different. In the United Church, discernment is not just individual, it's communal. And we do that when we select ministers. It's not just someone's own individual discernment. And we also do that when we make decisions in the church. So I for those reasons, as well as some of the others that were mentioned, I am not in favor of this proposal.
Thank you, Sue. So Harry, I'm going to invite you to have your chance now to close out the debate.
I don't have too much to say other than I think it does belong in the larger discussion of membership and adherence. And it's not like we're not doing due diligence. If I can visualize that a pastoral care team elders would visit with these people ahead of time and include them as part of the discussion without trying to sway their minds when it comes time to vote. We're talking about people who were well informed and didn't get a chance to vote. And we think there has to be ways sometimes in some circumstances. And because you're on and you are on the list of the congregation, so we want to hear from you. We check with you without trying to sway your opinion. So we think that this has merit, particularly in some safe, and it even broadens the base of making a congregation safe for others. So.
Thank you, Harry. And I want to thank everybody who spoke to the proposal for keeping your remarks concise. So when we vote, we will be voting to approve the proposal that the manual section B 5.6 be amended to allow for voting by proxy, advance poll, ballots collected by congregational visitors, etc., at congregational meetings where the issue to be decided has had a sufficient amount of discussion and conversation ahead of time, so that members not able to be present at the time of the meeting can have a vote that will be counted. I'll call for the question. And that motion is defeated. So because that did not pass, we have to make a decision as a regional council whether we're going to transmit this proposal to general council without concurrence. And so, sorry, just let me ask Mark, do we make this motion in the positive, like we make a motion to transmit, or do we make the motion in the negative? We make a motion to not, or whoever argues it first.
So that's a question. John, how do you have the poll set up? Is the poll set up for the affirmative or the negative? Because we have to have a
I was just editing the poll. I can do it either way.
Okay, let's well, it doesn't matter because we have to have the discussion on the question either way. So let's have the question that we because we'll go the same way that we have been in the past. So the question was, will we approve this or not? It was in the affirmative. So we'll have the question of, will we send this to the General Counsel Executive? Yes or no, because that's also in the affirmative, which is how we have been dealing with the other proposals.
Thank you, Mark, for that clarification. Okay, so we're going to put a motion on the floor that we transmit this proposal to General Counsel Executive with non-concurrence.
Executive General Counsel.
Oh, sorry, that's what you said, so I was just quoting. To General Counsel 45 with non-concurrence. So that is the motion. Do we have someone who will make that motion? Harry? Good, wonderful. And do we have someone who will second that motion? I saw Kathy Hurd put her hand up first. Her last name is spelled H-I-R-D, and it's Kathy with a C and a Y. Okay, so now, is there anyone who would like to speak to this motion? Harry, did you want to speak towards it as the mover? Oh, Harry had to get up. All right, so we'll just move into debate on this. Sorry, I didn't allow for questions of clarification, but there really aren't any and none needed. So Heather, I'll recognize you.
Heather Leffler, Rockwood and Stone United Churches. I would speak against transmitting this with non-concurrence. We talked about the amount of time the General Counsel has available to it, and it seems to me that if we weren't in favor, we shouldn't be passing it on to take their time.
Thanks, Heather. And Kathy.
I think there were some really good issues raised on both sides. I think that I have been in meetings where after the discussion, I made a decision that I didn't think I would make. So I totally accept that being present. But I think that in the new world that we are in, that we have to work on some of the options for different kinds of voting. And so I don't want to shut this one down. I would like to encourage the church to think about all of the issues that were raised around how we have discussions when not everybody can be present and when not everybody is technologically astute.
Thank you, Kathy. That was Kathy Hurd who seconded that motion. Neil.
Neil Parker, Vienna Unity Church. And by definition, I attend using online communication. And I will be attending General Counsel on your behalf as one of your representatives. I am looking forward to having this on the floor of General Counsel. I'm in favor of passing it on. It is important that we do not concur, but I still think the issue needs to be on the floor of General Counsel. This issue is not going away until we do away with computers and move beyond this fad we have with digital communication. Not going to happen. So please pass it on so that we can deal with it at a next level. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Norm. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Norm.
Norm Eigenram, non-forest pastoral charge. I would like to have an idea of where the vote count was, because if it was unanimously defeated, I don't see any point in passing it on. But if it was close to 50-50, I think then it warrants further consideration.
It was 77% against. So there was about a quarter of the court wanted to approve that proposal. if that helps anyone in their decision making. Judy.
Judy Cerubic, she, her, Kincardine United Church. I'm also a commissioner to GC45, and I am not looking forward to having this on the floor because of the number of other ones that we will be dealing with that have concurrence from the regions, and therefore there's going to be enough work to do without. I would say if the movers and seconders of this motion in the first place feel it's important enough to bring it up again, then take some of the information that has been discerned and rework it. But don't send it on.
Thanks, Judy. David.
Thank you. David Shearman, Knox United Church, Durham Crawford. I voted against the motion, but I would like to see it transmitted. And the simple reason is that there's been a study done in this city and in other municipalities about online voting. And what they discovered is that the largest people who use online voting are those over 70. So the argument about not being able to use computers seems to be specious at this point. But my point is that I think that the issue does need to be considered at some point by the General Council. And so while it may end up on the General Council Executive's agenda to be dealt with, and that's okay, but I would rather see it raised, and this isn't the first time it's been raised, I'd rather see it raised than not.
Thanks, David. Okay, so the two who have their hands up now, I'll recognize. And if you're saying something that someone's already said, I'll invite you to lower your hand. I'll recognize Peter.
Peter Kupfer, Trinity Elmira, and member of the Community Support Commission. I would agree to send it, but as a person who is solely involved using only Zoom because of restrictions in the House, I would say at least we should send it off to GC45.
Thank you, Peter. And Colin.
I'm going to go completely against the last two speakers because I voted in favor, but I would vote against sending it on. I think it would make more sense for us to do more work on this to iron out the problems that we have and forward to the next General Council a proposal that maybe has a better chance of being passed.
Thank you, Colin.
Sorry, Colin Snyder, he, him.
Thanks.
The
Thanks,
rest.
Colin.
Okay, thanks.
Remind everybody to do that as well. Harry, are you back at your computer? Would you like to say anything to close the debate since you were the mover of this motion? The motion being to transmit the proposal with non-concurrence.
Yeah, I think we should, because General Council needs to figure out how we can be an inclusive church without having exclusionary, restrictive voting procedures in some instances. So I just think that needs to be heard as part of the discussion, even by the executive or something. One court, by defining everything out, we're kind of doing their work as to what qualifies and what doesn't. I think that's General Council's work to discern what would qualify and what would not ours. But if it needs to be reworked, I'm sure people at Lakeshore would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Harry. Okay, so I'm going to call for the vote. I will close the poll. And that is defeated. So we will not be transmitting that proposal to General Council, but perhaps we'll see it again one day in the future for another General Council. And I just want to thank those who worked on this proposal and brought it before us, and for all of those who engaged in the conversation around it so faithfully, so that we could come to this decision. We're going to take a break now. We're just going to give you we're going to give you till 3 o'clock. So my computer says 2:53, so that gives you 7-minute break. And then we're going to come back at 3 o'clock to resume our work. I made it back onto my own computer, so yay! Okay, and Mark told me several times while we were on break what we were doing the second we came back, and it is watching the video we have prepared to celebrate our candidates for ordination that will be celebrated tomorrow at our celebration of ministry service, which is at Grace United in Hanover, which is where I am right now in the church building, and looking forward to gathering tomorrow at 3 p.m. for that celebration of ministries. So I'd ask John to share that video.
These persons have previously been recognized as designated lay ministers. Now they have met the requirements of our church to enter the order of ministry. They have been prayerfully examined and tested, and have with us discerned God's call to ministry. Anne Harbridge, O.M., recognized as lay pastoral minister in 2006 by Toronto Conference. She served Trinity Centennial United Church in Rosemont from 2003 till 2022 before retiring. On November 1st, she took an appointment at Trinity Primrose in Shelburne. Sandra Cable, O.M., recognized by London Conference on May 23, 2009. Served Brussels Ethel Pastoral Charge, St. Andrews United, Bayfield, Brussels and Blythe United Churches since retirement, and several churches in Lambton and Huron County as pulpit supply. Appointment to Zion United Church, Crediton. Keith Lockhart, O.M., recognized by Toronto Conference as lay pastoral minister on June 5, 1999. Served Grenfell United Church, Trinity United Church Collingwood, Centennial United Church, Stainer, Wasaga Beach United Church, and Central United Church in Barrie.
Okay. We have one more proposal for General Council that we would like to deal with now. It's Proposal 9, found on page 35 and 36 of your workbook, entitled Sacraments for Retired Diaconal Ministers. And I'm going to invite Judy Zarubik to speak to that.
So, good afternoon. Judy Zarubik, she, her, Kincardine United Church. So the issue is that many diaconal ministers who have been in relationship with pastoral charges have been administering sacraments in their communities of faith and other ministry positions for years, and then they retire and their license is removed. So currently, so many regions, when they are asked, do license retired diaconal ministers, but many regions do not. So there's an inequity across the United Church of Canada. And so this makes it difficult then for those diaconal ministers who are not granted sacraments to be able to do, to help congregations have sacramental privileges. And as pastoral charge supervisors then cannot offer sacramental they can't offer sacraments to the places that they are trying to help. So there's this inconsistency that basically, to me, is a justice issue. And so what the recommendation is that the regional council provide license to retired diaconal ministers on request, and that the general council could authorize an amendment to the current policy by removing the diaconal ministers line. So if you, in I2.4, license to administer sacraments, by removing the or retired diaconal ministers from that line, then it would basically say that the regional council may grant a license to administer the sacraments to a designated lay minister, a candidate serving under appointment, admission minister serving under appointment, diaconal supply or ordained supplies, and then just remove the or retired diaconal ministers. Take that right out. But then add to I2.4.2 under diaconal ministers that the regional council must, so right now it says the regional council must grant a diaconal minister a license to administer the sacraments when the diaconal minister is serving in a call or appointment or are employed in another ministry position. And then add, or when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license. The license would be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position. So it's taking or retired diaconal minister from one part and adding that when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for an answer, right now it says they may be given it. Now it would be they must, to make it equitable across the whole United Church.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Are there any questions for clarification about the proposal that Judy is presenting to us? Colin.
Yeah, thanks, President Jennifer. So as I'm reading this, and maybe I'm not understanding, it's the end of a long week. I'm an ordained minister.
Yes.
So it suggests to me that once I retire, that I may or may not be allowed to offer the sacraments, but that a diaconal minister would have to be approved to do so. Am I reading that right?
No.
Mark says he can answer, Judy, if you want.
No, he's not reading it right.
Yeah. So, Executive Minister Mark, so the manual already says in a different section that a retired ordained minister maintains the right to offer sacraments. So we're not changing that. This proposal is not changing that. That is in another section of the manual that is under ordained ministers. So when you retire, Colin, it is automatically granted that you retain the right to administer sacraments all throughout your retirement. This doesn't change that section. This is just addressing the section on diaconal ministry.
Okay, thank you, because that's not the way I was reading it, but it is the end of a long week, so thanks.
Yeah. So basically you got your license to administer sacraments at ordination, and commissioned diaconal ministers, because they're not commissioned to sacraments, it has to be requested that they get sacraments, and it must be given to them if requested. And then once they're retired, it's pulled away automatically. So what this proposal is trying to do is saying, because diaconal ministers and ordained ministers are both in the order of ministry, that they should also be able to keep or be granted, if they wish, the sacramental privileges in retirement.
Are there any other questions for clarification? Okay, does anyone have any additions or changes they would like to suggest for this proposal? Recognize Roz. You're muted,
Roz.
Roz Vincent Haven, retired ministry personnel diaconal, member of the Congregational Support Commission, and person here. And what we've just heard from our executive minister is that our colleagues in the order of ministry automatically continue having a right. They don't have to request anything. That just continues on with them. I have, for all of my ministries, served in pastoral charges within Hamilton Conference as team leader, solo minister, or intentional interim ministry. And in my recollection, I've never had to ask for administering the sacraments, nor did the congregation. It was just granted for me in my role. And since retirement, the 8 years, I was aghast when I heard this, because there is an assumption that I would continue to do what I've always done. So I would very much like to remove the on request on the first section, and on the end one, which is 1242, is when they make a request. I think if people who are diaconal ministers who are members of the one order should be granted sacraments if they want to, or they don't, just like our colleagues and brothers and sisters in the ordained stream. I see this as, again, as Judy said, as a issue of exclusion and injustice within the internal workings of our church. So that was my little amendment. Thank you.
My understanding, and not being a diaconal minister, so I don't want to speak for all diaconal ministers, but I have heard from some diaconal ministers that they don't want sacraments and are quite happy to have to ask for them if they want it. But it said that's only a couple that I've heard from, so I don't know whether that would upset some diaconal ministers who don't want sacramental privileges.
Upon retirement.
Upon retirement, yes. Or even before retirement, because we're talking about retirement, but according to this part of the manual, it must be asked for to get it. And
before it happens automatically if they're in a call or appointment or employed in another ministry position. But once you retire, that's where you were saying that you would make a request for a license. In the previous part of that I 2.4.2, the way I'm reading it, it says the regional council must grant as long as they're serving in an appointment. So
yes.
Okay. Anne.
I'm just trying to differentiate here. So if a diaconal minister is serving as a pastoral charge supervisor, they're retired, they're not in an appointment anywhere else, they will have to request a sacrament license to continue. That's how this reads.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand it. I guess I'd like to say the same thing for retired DLMs, because we're in the same boat as diaconal ministers. We don't retain our license unless we request one.
Okay. So clear as mud to me. Sorry, just give me a.
I would think the difference between the fact of DLM, designated lay ministers, and diaconal ministers is that diaconal ministers are in the order of ministry. And that's where the differentiation comes in here, is that and in the order of ministry, that they should be able to, if they wish, request a license during retirement, so that it would go until death do us part.
Okay. Neil, I'll just ask the people who have your hands raised right now, are you speaking towards this change, this suggested change of taking out the need for the diaconal minister to request it, or a different change or addition? You could just unmute and tell me. Because I just thought that I might kind of do just a warm, cool, ask for a warm and cool kind of poll, so that we could see if the court was in favor, generally speaking, of changing that to make it be more automatic as it is for ordained. So if you still wish to speak to
Yes.
get about that addition or change, just keep your hand up and I'll recognize you. Fran.
Fran Farrell, St. Andrews Ripley. As being a congregation who is looking at supply ministry people and having sacraments in sequence with the calendar year, I feel that sometimes the options of having a person who has sacramental privileges, as long as they've still got them, that's wonderful. But in our case, we had a ministry person come back who was a DLM, and her sacramental privileges were denied, or taken away. So we had to go different routes, and we have our Presbyterian ministry personnel who fill in for us. So my feeling is to speak for this amendment to the proposal, to remove the restrictions.
Okay, so just to be clear, this isn't an amendment. We can change things. It doesn't have to be called that. We're just trying to make this proposal reflect what we want it to say if we were to pass it on. And so I will ask for that poll. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying, yeah, let's change it. So I'm going to just ask for a warm, cool poll. So if you're warm to this idea of removing the need for request and just saying or is retired from diaconal ministry, that they must grant the license to administer sacraments. If you're warm to that, you would vote yes. And if you are opposed to that change to this proposal, then you would vote no, just so I can see where we're at as a court.
Jennifer, can you repeat the sentence again? I'm
yes.
curious.
So we're going to have a poll comes up, and if you vote yes, then you would like to see when the diaconal minister makes a request for a license removed, and just say or a retired diaconal minister at the end there. So they would. I don't think it was clear either.
No.
Yeah. So Mark's going to try to say what we're going to do.
Hello, everyone. Executive Minister Mark. So, so what we are voting on is to take out when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license. We are taking that part out of the proposal. This is what we're suggesting, and instead just saying or are employed in another ministry position or is retired. So what this warm cool poll is deciding is if you want it to just say the proposal, so this is not passing the proposal, this is just seeing if you want to change the language in the proposal, right, of saying employed in another ministry position or is retired. If you want that, you would vote warm or yes. If you don't want that and you want it to say or are employed in another ministry position when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license, if you want it to have the request, you would vote no or cool. But once again, this is not passing the proposal. This is just changing the language in the proposal.
Point of order.
I'll recognize Marg with a point of
Okay,
order.
I'm not sure if it's a point of order, but I think it is. Do we not have to ask the mover, like it's not a friendly amendment? Do we not have to ask the mover if they're okay with that? Just asking.
Hasn't been moved yet.
Did you hear that response that Mark said to my side? I wasn't unmuted. I wasn't muted. So he said, it hasn't been moved yet. So well, this is just sort of like a warm cool. If the court is warm to it, then we'll talk about making that change.
Is the placement is the placement of a retired diaconal minister not more appropriately put after diaconal minister?
Well, we can worry about that after I see if everybody says no, we're not in favor of it anyway, then we don't have to discuss it any further. But this is just an informal poll. Just like if we were together in a room, I would say like raise pink cards or raise blue cards if you're cool to it, but we don't have that option. So I'm just going to call for this question. I'll ask for the poll to be closed. The warm, cool check-in. Okay, so the court is overwhelmingly warm to that change. And so I'll ask Judy, are you warm to that change?
Oh, yes. My only concern is this next sentence. If we change that is, so the license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position. If you're retired and you're not in another ministry position, what does that mean? So until So that's my only concern with it. Otherwise, I'm warm to it.
Okay.
And I don't know whether
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know whether taking that sentence out works as well.
Agreed.
If you're looking at trying to bring diaconal ministers up equal in sacramental privileges to ordained, then if we remove the last sentence, I think it basically says that the regional council must grant a diaconal minister a license to administer when they're serving a call, appointment, or employed in other ministry or retired. Basically makes them the same as ordained.
Just let me Okay, so despite my asking you if you're warm or cool to it, on further discussion, I feel that making this change actually changes the intent of the proposal, which was just to say before the regional council could grant it or could decide not to. And now all that Judy wanted is for us to say, we want the regional councils to have to grant it if the retired diaconal minister requests it. And I feel that it's important to keep that concise, as it's much bigger if we change it, which I feel would require more time than we have to discuss and make a decision on whether we are in agreement with a changed proposal.
And I would also add that I think that the original proposal has a better chance, if it passes here, of passing at General Council.
Okay, so sorry about that little digression there, but I'm gonna, yeah, it takes time. We're discerning. The spirit is moving in this group, and I appreciate what everyone said as we were discussing that to get us to, let's go and make it back to way the proposal was presented to us as we began. McCall, other changes, additions?
Yeah, I would suggest, no, we just undid what we did, but that it be a second sentence, because otherwise we are taking away licenses for a duration, and that duration is often dependent on regional council policy, except for when there's a call or point in place. So making it a second sentence or adding it as having general council added as a different line would clarify, instead of just trying to add a word in to change it. I think we're wordsmithing now, but if it was a second sentence or a second separate section, we can get to what we want more clearly than just adding the word.
I'm not. So that even confused me.
So we have in our regional council policy, we have a section on retired diaconal ministers, which is a separate section, and it says will grant a license upon receiving a letter from the retiree. This, if you put it as a,
so that's in this region. It is not across the board, and what we're looking at is taking it so that it's across the board of the United Church of Canada.
Yes, I'm suggesting for the layout in the manual change that it be a second separate sentence instead of just adding a comma, because it will add the duration of call is with when you're in a call or appointment.
At the bottom where it says the license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position, that gets moved up. And then instead of saying when a retired diaconal minister requests for a license inside of that statement, a separate statement, the regional council must grant a retired diaconal minister a license to administer the sacraments upon when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license, or something like that, as a separate statement, because there is no duration of that retirement that can be given.
That straightens out the last sentence that we were concerned about.
Yes. Yes, which we only realized we were concerned about it once we tried to change it and then thought, oh, wait, that duration doesn't apply. Okay.
So my understanding is then that it's that what we're talking about possibly changing it to, or are employed in another ministry position, period, and then move the sentence, the license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position. And then when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license, it will be granted, or it must be granted.
Yes, I was thinking maybe we do like an A, B, but now we're wordsmithing. But the regional council must grant a diaconal minister a license to administer the sacraments. A, when the diaconal minister is serving in an appointment call. B, when the retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Except I'd spell license differently in the green part. So that's my OCD.
We'll
kicking in.
worry about that. But okay, so now that is what that's what we're suggesting, just as a slight change to make it clear that the duration part of what's already in the manual still applies to that and doesn't apply to the retired diaconal minister. Janet.
Yes, Janet Cleve, St. John's, Alliston. The change you're making right now makes the retired diaconal minister different than the diaconal minister. Because the way it's worded now, the way the change goes, you're saying the diaconal minister can apply, can ask for, it must be given a license if they're serving, but the retired diaconal minister must be given a license, period.
If they request
You're changing the whole thing.
If they request it. Only if they request it.
But if they request it, but then there's no limit to that, where there is a limit on the diaconal minister. You're changing the meaning of the whole thing. Like the diaconal minister in an appointment has to have sacrament license. And when that appointment is finished, then that license is revoked or whatever. But the retired diaconal minister can make a request regardless of whether they're in an appointment, and they get their license and it's indefinite. Like you're changing the whole thing.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Mark speak to that.
Hi, Executive Minister Mark. Thank you. Perfect. So what I'm wondering is, again, this is one of those, we do the work to learn out what we need to do. And I would go to McCall's judgment on this as well as our pastoral relations minister. But I'm actually wondering if the way that we had it originally, when it's talking about the license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position, is not being a pastoral charge supervisor considered, could we not consider that another ministry position? So that, right, this was part of the point of this, is that if they're serving in a role like that, that it's for the duration of them being that pastoral charge supervisor. So I'm wondering if either we add, at the end of this, the regional council must grant a sacramental license to retired diaconal ministers who make a request for a license for the duration of their ministry, but it's the same language. So that's why I'm wondering if how we had it the first time, that our other ministry position covered the terms on the retired aspect. McCall?
So the terms of the license, when they're not spelled out, are decided by the regional council. So our licenses are for 5 years when we grant licenses, except for when there is, for diaconal ministers, they're in a call or appointment. So right now we have as our policy that the Human Resources Commission will grant a license upon receiving a letter from the retiree. The license is without geographical limits and is for 5 years renewable. So you don't have to have it in the manual, because then it is that's the piece that's sorted out by the regional council based on local experiences. So by not having it, it's not continuous. It says that a license must be granted. The terms of the license are a regional council decision making. So you can leave it without going into the details of the length of license, because that is a regional council decision. And I would not tie it into a pastoral charge supervisor, because that's not a call or appointment. Yeah. We also have a lot of lay pastoral charge supervisors. I think the need comes out in pulpit supply more often.
Okay. So that was a good discussion so far on on why we might make changes, and not really yet on the proposal itself. So I'm wondering if we are ready to, have this motion be moved as we reverted it back to what it was originally, and then open it up for debate. Judy, would you be prepared to make this motion?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I will.
And do we have a seconder? I saw Colin Snyder. His hand go up first. Okay. Judy, would you like to speak to this motion before I open it up to the floor?
Yes, please. So I think this is important because it makes it equal across all of the United Church of Canada, so that we don't end up with diaconal ministers that move from one province to another or one region to another and find out that that they're not allowed to do the ministry that they feel called and have done for years. It's just a justice issue for me, that we need. That's at least one step towards becoming more just church.
Okay. Thank you, Judy. So I'm opening up the floor for anyone who would like to speak to the proposal on whether or not to agree to propose that General Council 45 remove the wording "or retired diaconal minister" from section I 2.4.1 of the manual in what the in who the regional council may grant a license to, and adding that in the section under diaconal ministers, I 2.4.2, the regional council must grant a diaconal minister a license in those different situations, or when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license. So that's what is open for debate right now. And I see Therese's hand up first.
Yeah. And I'm not really commenting on it. There's a word missing that you actually put in when you read it. So there was an "or" missing, but that was all. I wasn't ready to comment on it.
Thanks, Therese. Roz.
Yeah, Judy, bless your heart. You proposed this as a way to be a little more equal, inclusive. I don't think it goes far enough, quite frankly. Either diaconal ministers are part of the order of ministry or they're not. Where does that leave people like me who does do pulpit supply on occasion and helps out as a VAM in the pastoral charge that I worship at, in having a license for sacrament. I don't understand, I guess, why when I've had I've been accountable and deemed as having the ability to grant license to administer sacraments when I was paid, but now that I'm still accountable and not paid, I either have to ask for it or I don't get it if I'm just a man.
Thanks, Roz. Appreciate your comments. Sorry you ran out of time. I'll remind everyone that I am trying to keep everyone to a minute on your comments. Kathy.
I support this as a step forward, but I totally agree with Roz. In the current situation with the number of congregations that are without settled ministry, we need to expand who can offer all of the support, the sacraments, so this is one step, but it's a little one.
Thanks, Kathy. Deborah.
Yeah, Deborah Debbio. I'm a retired diaconal minister. I want to speak to the concern around diaconal ministers retired who are being asked to do pulpit supply. So restricting this to pastoral charge supervisor is just that. It's a restriction. I've been asked to come into pastoral charges and do sacraments, and I've had to say, no, I can't. And so I don't want to see it restricted to a duration or a specific appointment, because I don't have either one of those. But I would like to be able to go in and at least be able to offer that to pastoral charges on a pulpit supply basis.
And as it stands, this proposal, if it was passed by General Council, would allow you to do so. There are no restrictions within it. Mark would like to speak as well.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Deborah, Executive Minister Mark. I was just using that as an example of the language of other ministry position. By no means how this proposal is laid out, as McCall had said. It is saying that if a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license, it must be granted by the regional council, but each regional council is able to decide what the terms of that license are. And so as an example, in Western Ontario Waterways, it is a 5-year license. So this is not dictating the terms, but saying they must grant it, and then the regional council is able to dictate. It would come up with those terms just as we had. I apologize if my trying to propose the scenario made it more complicated.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Oh, Diane.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can.
I'm just confused in the wording. The wording has switched around so much, and it was up on the screen, and I was trying to write it down and I didn't get it down. If it could be, I don't know, read slowly while we write it down, that might be helpful. I don't know. That's all I wanted to say.
I definitely will reread it again, but we went back to the original version that's in the handbook on page 35. But right before we vote, I will reread it. Hopefully that will be soon enough. Mary Elizabeth.
I can't hear you. You're muted.
Trying to get out of it.
She's muted.
She's just trying to sort that. There she goes.
Hopefully you can hear me now. So semi-retired diaconal minister. I would vote strongly in favor of this motion. It is a good first step. I would just remind perhaps the court that back when we were voting on remits way back, there was a remit for one order that would roll diaconal and ordained together. And the diaconal community at that point had quite quite a strong discussion, and I would say it was somewhat divided on that. And so anything beyond that would suggest that diaconal ministers would have sacraments for privileges for life would certainly change the nature of our sense of ordained being called to pastoral care, sacrament, and the word, and diaconal ministries being called to service and pastoral care. And
thank you, Mary.
Just one other. Anyway.
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. So Judy, would you like to speak again to this motion before I call the question?
Yes, I think I would. I agree in some respects that it may be just a first step, but a first step is better than no step. And I think passing this then and sending it on to General Council means that it'll be a further discussion there and possibly more steps. But at least there's a first step. in making it so that our congregations can have better access to sacraments, and that our diaconal ministers can do the work that they feel called to do, including sacraments.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, so what we are voting on is to agree with the proposal for sacraments for retired diaconal ministers, that it be given to the General Council, 45, in which we would request that the General Council consider this proposal to remove or retire diaconal ministers from line I.2.4.1a of the manual, and then to add to I.2.4.2 diaconal ministers. The regional council must grant a diaconal minister a license to administer the sacraments when the diaconal minister is serving in a call or appointment, or are employed in another ministry position, or when a retired diaconal minister makes a request for a license. The license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position. I'll call for the question. I'll close the vote. And that is approved. So that will be sent to General Council. Okay, wonderful work, everybody. Those are our proposals to General Council, and I'm just going to give the floor to McCall for just a second so he can remind us all of what the Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council policy is around diaconal ministers and retired diaconal ministers requesting a license to administer sacraments.
Yeah, thank you. And as Judy said, this proposal was around the manual change. It's not speaking to the regional council policy. So I just wanted to let people know, because I did hear several times, I'm retired, I can't. Our policy is that the Human Resources Commission will, we use the word will, grant a license upon receiving a letter from the retiree. You can find the sacrament license policy in the toolkit section of our regional council website. And there is a correction that has to be made still on that. The section on diaconal ministers outside of a pastoral relationship, the manual does not include that in the section. But the Human Resources Commission is changing that section of our policy to, we will grant a license upon receiving a letter. So the same sort of layout to diaconal ministers outside of a pastoral relationship upon request. So just a clarity that the changes you voted on for the manual changes are what we already have in place here. So if you are retired and a diaconal minister and you need a sacrament license, please contact the Human Resources Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, McCall. So we're working towards equity across the entire United Church of Canada with that proposal we just passed. We want all the regional councils to have a similar kind of policy to what the one we have is. And so, Mark, I'll recognize you.
Am I allowed to ask Michael a question?
McCall, yep.
Yes. McCall, can you define retired, please?
So there was actually myself and another staff were asking that question too. So I'm talking about retired as in ministers who are not in a appointment. So we have re-engaged pensioners, and they would be eligible for a sacrament license because they are in an appointment. These are retired ministers not in an appointment because there's already a license. You're already granted a license if you're in an appointment and you're a re-engaged pensioner, so retired and have entered back into ministry. If you're retired without a appointment or call, and you are you'll be granted a license upon request.
Thanks for that question, Mark. Okay, so we're going to move along. with the support of the court here, now we get to move into a proposal that is for us, and we actually get to decide something that we're going to do, not just what we're going to send along to the regional, to the general council. So this is proposal number 8. It's on pages 34 and maybe 35, sorry, of the workbook. It's a proposal for a candidate support network. And I'm going to ask if Heather Leffler might like to speak to this.
Jennifer, I'll speak to it. Declaring an interest. My daughter is a candidate for diaconal ministry. So I was a part of originating this proposal. I think Ann Harbridge had told me that she would move it, but I'm happy to speak to it. So in our tradition, an Education and Students Committee back in the Presbytery was responsible for oversight and care of our candidates for ministry. And in our new structure, our Office of Vocation looks after the oversight and the candidacy path and so on. The students belong to our regional council, but when they became named as candidates, we simply hear their names. We don't have a way to engage with them. And if they're in a pastoral charge, which many of them in an appointment, many of them need to do as part of their process, then we get to know them in that way and they have contact with the regional council. But for those who are at the stage in their process where they're not in an appointment, they have no way of coming to the region except to ask to be a guest. And I think when you're a student and you've got lots to juggle, it's really hard to say, oh, I'd like to be a guest at that meeting and I'd like to somehow get involved. And so we also had experiences where students wanted to get together, but the Office of Vocations wasn't able to give them one another's names to provide support for themselves because of confidentiality concerns. And so what we're proposing is that we would set up a student and candidate support network where we would actually name 12 people to that, and their role would be to connect with students as they're identified by the Office of Vocation and orient them to the region, celebrate when they're approved as candidates in person or in a Zoom meeting, support opportunities for the individuals to connect with other candidates people on the candidacy pathway within the region, and ensure that students and candidates are aware of learning opportunities in the regional council. And it might not be limited to that, but that would be where we'd see as a starting point. We're suggesting the network would be made of 7 to 12 people, so it follows the pattern of our other commissions. And it would be one ordained minister, one diaconal minister, one student or candidate for ordination, one student or candidate for diaconal ministry, and one lay person, so that we would, the base of that group would be across all the ordered ministry positions and student lay and ordered ministers. They would relate to the Human Resources Commission, because if there were things that they lifted up that were important, that would be done through the Pastoral Relations Minister and the Human Resources Commission. And we would not be limited over time. This mandate could evolve, but we would suggest that they have Zoom gatherings facilitated for them once or twice a year, and that they might consider requesting funding for an annual gathering. So I think that's what I would offer now, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for doing that, Heather. I know it's important to see what the vested interest is in something like this when it's presented. And so if you'd like to have Anne field questions, this proposal was also brought before the WOW executive, and that's where it's originating from here. So Anne is on the WOW executive and can speak towards any questions for clarifications that anyone might have right now around this creation of a candidate support network. Roz, question for clarification?
Roz Vincent Haven, retired ministry personnel diaconal. member of the Congregational Support Commission. And I am really in favor of this. My question for clarification, and I think maybe it's just ambiguous, but candidate would also include those who are candidates for admission to be part of this as well. That's a question.
Anne?
We didn't actually talk about that, Roz, but yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know that we would be exclusive. The candidates for admission are often in a different place, though, in their ministry. Candidates who are students are at the very beginning. Many of our candidates for admission have long experience within the church environment. And so their needs might be slightly different, I think. But I'm not sure that we would be exclusive of that.
Okay, Linda.
Hi, Linda Roberts, DLM with Lucknow Trinity Pastoral Charge. I would like to ask why designated lay minister is not included on that list. For somebody like myself who was recognized in October 2023, I'm not eligible for the ordination interview for 5 years. So we have a lot of vested interest, and we've been candidates in supervised ministry sites and would have something to share. So I'm just asking if that could be added.
Yeah, there's no reason we couldn't add that, but my understanding is that the DLM program as it is going away. And so we won't be having new students in the DLM. There are probably, well, in fact, I know there are some students currently in the process. So yeah, I agree. They should be included in that.
I'm just asking for the committee and to be included in the committee.
Yeah.
You know, because.
Oh, in the committee of.
Yes, yeah, because the program is still in existence. There's 12 of us that started and they're going to be graduating until 2025.
Right.
So there's you know, I know from our class, our cohort, there's 12 already basically that are going to be eligible for ordination in our 5-year time period.
Right. Right. Okay.
So that would be in addition to one, well, actually, that's an addition or change. Now I see, not just a question for clarification. So we'll just see if we have any more questions for clarification. Remember this forward for when I ask for any additions or changes, and we'll look at whether or not we want to add that.
And maybe I could add one more clarification, Jennifer, around the admissions candidates. They are already in an appointment as well. So they have status within the regional council as being appointed within the regional council, whereas some students are not appointed and have no status in the council.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Dan.
Unmute yourself. Dan Lever, Port Elgin United Church in Port Elgin along the beautiful shores of Lake Huron. How much consulting or information or requests has this been for come from students or candidates? Like, was there a lot of candidates coming and saying, hey, we really want this?
I wouldn't say there specifically have been requests for it, but we have seen, I mean, I'm an educational supervisor supervising 2 students. And while we encourage them to connect with one another, it's not always easy for them because they don't already have those connections established. So I think whether they've specifically asked, I would have to say probably not a lot of requests for that, but it is a gap that exists in the new structure that the presbytery used to address with regular meetings with ENS and that kind of thing. Those regular meetings aren't happening anymore because the pathway is different.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for clarification? Just to remind everyone, that's the step we're on right now. Diane.
Very simple. Oh, Diane Dick, representative from Georgian Shores United Church. Just wondering wording here, because it says the network will be 7 to 12 people. And yet when I look at the minimum,
it's 6. And that's just what I noticed, and maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know, but it says 7 to 12. So I just wondered if there's another person that should be in there.
Well, I think the 6 who are named because of the specific roles that they fulfill. There could be another 6 who don't fill any particular role. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Heather?
So I just wanted to clarify on the consultation. I personally have consulted with a number of students in the Guelph area as I met them. And also my daughter consulted with the diaconal students. And there were students across Canada that wished that we could send it to all their regions, that it didn't have to be limited to ours. So there was a high level of interest in the diaconal student community, which I have the connection to through my daughter.
Thanks, Heather. Bruce.
I'll be really close. Quick, Bruce Dixon, minister in Guelph. I have a student in my own church who didn't know that there were other students who were in Guelph. So just to the comment from, I think it was Dan, their students, they don't know each other, even in the same town, and she felt a loss of that, not knowing that information. So anyway, we can help foster connection between students, would appreciate it. I know from her. So anecdotal, I know, but one more story of support for this idea.
Thanks, Bruce. So we're just going to move into additions or changes. What was the feeling, Anne, Heather, around the addition of one student / candidate for designated lay ministry within the or designated or at the top? Yeah, one ordained minister, one diaconal minister, one designated lay minister. Is that where it was supposed to go in?
Yeah, I would have no problem making that addition.
I would agree.
Yeah.
If we have students on the pathways, we would want to support them.
Support every pathway. Okay. So that's where that addition would go in that we were just talking about. So the network that would be recruited would include at least one ordained minister, one diaconal minister, one designated lay minister, one student candidate for ordination, one student candidate for diaconal ministry, and one lay person.
Would it be a designated lay minister or one student candidate slash? Since they're moving towards ordination when they finish, is it not the student that we want there?
Well, except that they will be a designated lay minister for 5 years after they're no longer a student.
Okay. Okay.
So you have to have been recognized and served for 5 years before you can be interviewed for ordination or commissioning.
Okay. So
sorry, that was just me not knowing.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay, so we're in agreement there. We'll leave it there. Rebecca.
Not to complicate the list, but I'm wondering if it might be prudent to have a recent graduate on that committee as well, just as someone who has recently treaded through this path, and they just might have helpful insights that people that haven't been through the current process as it is now, or graduated years before, might not have.
As someone on the recruitment team, I will say that I'm hoping those people will self-select, and if we get too many parameters for who we need to recruit, we're going to be in trouble.
Then we should keep that in mind as another member of the recruitment team.
Yes, yeah, let's just let people self-select into those roles. I have a feeling that there will be interest in those who have recently been through the system to become part of this network of support. Judy.
So, Judy Cerubic, minister at King Cardinal United Church. So my question is, that's really wonderful to try and include those. And And would it, if possible, rather than making it a statement that it will include, to give the recruitment team the ability to say, we really tried, but we weren't able to? And leave a spot open for. I know the Board of Vocation or the nominations at a national level, these are the things that they hope to get and not necessarily get them, and therefore leave a spot to say, okay, we're still looking for one designated lay minister who wants to be on there. So leave
Could
the
we
spot.
say instead of possibly include, could we say we'll strive to include?
Yeah, that sounds, to me, that's more realistic.
Does that sound all right with those additions and changes? Okay. Anne, are you prepared to move this
Sure,
proposal?
I'll move it. Yeah.
Do I have someone who will second it? Bruce Dixon. I saw your hand up. So this motion has been moved and seconded. Anne, as the mover, would you like to speak again to the proposal before we open it to debate?
No, I can have the last word, so go ahead and open it to debate.
All right. So I'll remind you, if you'd like to speak to words in favor or opposed to this proposal, I invite you to raise your hand, and I'll remind people that I'll give you 1 minute to speak. So keep your words concise. I feel like we already did quite a lot of speaking towards it when we were discussing the questions for clarification, but Dan.
All right. Thank you. Dan Lever, Port Elgin United Church. I really appreciate what you're trying to offer, but I'm hesitant and I'm speaking against. I speak against because I'm concerned as one of these fresh ones. I was just commissioned in May. We already have a lot going on as students. CCS, and I can only speak on the Center for Christian Studies model, we have intentional learning circles, intentional learning community involved in it. And I feel like this is something added on top of. And as my clarifying question, has the candidates requested this? Is there an interest there for that? I like the intent. I'm just not 100% sure on this. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thanks, Dan. Rebecca.
I'll do it right this time. President-elect Rebecca Duncan, serving Badge Rose, Rob Roy, and Temple Hill United Churches. I have been out of school for 4 years now, and I want to speak in favor of it because it is absolutely something that I know myself and my classmates really wanted when we were in school. It's strange, but going through seminary can be an incredibly lonely time, and it's not nice to say, but we didn't always feel supported by the region in ways that we anticipated. And so having that group intentionally set for us, and maybe your participation or engagement in that group is voluntary as opposed to required, which might address Dan's situation or concerns. But we definitely were missing this piece through school.
Thanks, Rebecca. Roz.
Roz Vincent Haven, retired diaconal ministry personnel, member of the Congregational Support Commission. And I want to speak in favor of it. I think Rebecca really had, she maybe said what I wanted to say, but just as an addition, I think it is a voluntary, nobody's going to make people come, but it would be a lovely thing to be able to gather with others in the region as you're going through your process. I think it can be very isolating, and this would be an opportunity, maybe not a mandatory opportunity, but an opportunity to gather with other folks who are having the same issues or, you know, having the same experience. So I would want to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Roz. Sandra? Sandra, oh, there you are.
Sandra Cable, DLM until tomorrow at Zion United in Crediton. I am in favor of this because back when I was in training, we had the presbytery, we had the groups, we had collegiality with all the way through that. It's not happening now, and I think that this is a great way to make the connections and to network with others and have those people on the network that can advise, and because not everybody's supported when they are going in training. We had that experience as DLMs. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Sandra. Anne, would you like to close the debate?
Sure, just a couple of points. I think it's good for us to remember that when our structure was created, what, 5 some years ago, we set in place an opportunity to have networks. We haven't really taken advantage of that opportunity in this region particularly. So this is a good opportunity to set up a network. I think any network is an optional thing. It's not mandatory. A student wouldn't be required to participate or attend anything that might be set up, but it's an opportunity for them to make connections. It's also an opportunity, I think, and I don't think it's explicitly mentioned in the proposal, but we often have students who might be serving in our region who come from other regions, and they would have no connections here except maybe with pastoral church or with a pastoral church supervisor or an educational supervisor, but even then, the educational supervisor could be from anywhere in the country. So I think it provides opportunities for those students in particular to start to make connections with colleagues in the region. And it would give them a place to talk about things like inconsistencies across the church. I mean, we've talked about that in other areas before, and even things like sacramental licenses and those kinds of things. Like how do we talk about that? So it gives them a place, a safe place, I think, to talk about things that are of concern to them.
Okay, thank you, Anne. I am going to just remind everyone that what we are voting on, this is proposal number 8, the establishment of a candidate support network. The network will be 7 to 12 people selected through the recruitment process and will include at least 1 ordained minister, 1 diaconal minister, 1 designated lay minister, 1 student candidate for ordination, 1 student candidate for diaconal ministry, and 1 lay person. The network would relate to the Human Resources Commission and the Pastoral Relations Minister. They would have access to admin support, set up Zoom gatherings once or twice a year, an optional in-person gathering once a year could be funded. I'll call for the question. We can close the poll. And that is carried. So we'll be establishing a new network. My fellow recruitment team I believe that will be of great benefit, and you all agree with me. So wonderful. So I want to, sorry, I want to present a motion to extend the order of the day by 15 minutes. And Terry is going to make that motion and Mark is going to second it. Sorry if I did it the wrong way around. People in the room here are willing to make that motion. And rather than debate the motion and take up extra time in the court, I'm just going to call for the question. So we're voting on whether or not to extend the order of the day by 15 minutes. Yes, if you agree to extend the order of the day so that we can deal with proposal number 5 that was unfinished business. And okay, we'll close the vote. And that is carried. So we're going to meet for just a little bit longer and see if we can't finish up everything that's before us. So at this time, we're going to go back to our unfinished business, which is proposal number 5 on pages 28 and 29 of the workbook, the clergy salary fund. We've already done clarifying questions for this proposal. So this is also a proposal to us about establishing a clergy salary fund. So I'll invite anyone who has any changes or additions they've been thinking about since we moved this to unfinished business earlier today, if they would like to put up their hand, if they have any changes or additions they think we should make to this. Okay, seeing no one with their hands up, I'm going to ask for someone to move this motion. I believe Terry, and this will be moved by Terry Smith, seconded by Mark Laird. Did you want to speak again to this motion at all before we debate? Is there any debate? Excellent. Heather.
Heather Leffler, Rockwood and Stone United Churches, and on the executive as well. I would just like to really speak strongly for this. As we heard earlier, we have places like PTCC, the Presbyteries of Toronto Conference Corporation, and the foundation has grants for many things. Former churches of Waterloo Presbytery have the Up Fund. There's lots of places to get grants for capital, for new programs and so on, but there's no place that you can get support for ministry time. And I think we, as was expressed earlier, we really need leadership. And I think to support congregations in this way would be really helpful.
Thank you, Heather. And we just have one more clarifying question. I'll turn the microphone over to Mark.
Thank you, President Jennifer. Mark Laird, Executive Minister again. And I apologize, someone had sent me a private message of a clarifying question earlier, and I said I'd answer it when we came back to this time, and then I didn't. So the question is, I wonder about the wording where the funds need to be paid back from the sale of the property before any other disbursements. What if the community of faith has a mortgage? I think a mortgage holder would have first call on the proceeds as well as any other loan holder. It is implied that the other disbursements are what is left after any legally required payments have been made. And that is correct. So when we're talking about disbursements, that's disbursements according to our property policy. So when a community of faith disbands and the building is sold, we have a property policy that says where amount of those monies go after all legal disbursements. So what these funds are saying is that after all of those legal disbursements, before we then start dispersing according to the property policy, it would get paid back to the property fund first and then get dispersed amongst our property policy. But yes, any legal ones would take precedent over that. Thank you for the clarifying question.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for clearing that up. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to read again what we are voting for. So this is, I just set down, oh, there it is on the back. All right. So the regional council, you are voting on whether to create a fund, setting it up with a transfer of $200,000 from the property fund called the Clergy Salary Fund. This would allow the executive to report annually to the regional council on how the funds have supported communities of faith maintaining or increasing their ministry time. So the criteria are, this would be to be given to communities of faith who are looking to increase their ministry hours, to be given to communities of faith who can show that they will not be able to maintain their current ministry hours moving forward. And then what we were just clarifying was how that would be paid back if they did disband before. There's a 3-year plan with this. So I will call for the question. I'll close the vote, and that is approved. I'll move it to Mark for 1 second.
Well, President Jennifer is looking for a paper for the next piece. Executive Minister Mark speaking again. So just so people are aware, please understand it is going to take a little bit of time to get these funds all set up. So it will get sent out in our e-newsletter. They will be posted to our website. They will be sent out on Facebook, announcements saying when they are ready and open for applications, but that is not going to happen in 2024. We do not have enough time to get those set up in the next month and a half. Also remembering that you are one of 3 regional councils, all of who have passed new funds like this, and so we will be moving on. We will be working on it, but please know they will not be available right away. So just ask your patience for that. Thank you.
Okay, and as we move on, I just wanted to thank again the Human Resources Commission that you didn't hear from today for ceding their time so that we would have more time to do these proposals. And also, I want to draw to your attention, there's a recruitment report from our recruitment team that didn't make it into the workbook, but it's under the meeting resources. So I want to draw your attention to that because they also didn't have time on our agenda at this meeting to do a verbal report. I want to remind you about the celebration of ministry service tomorrow at 3 p.m. here at Grace United in Hanover. And I also want to remind you to save the dates for our next meeting that is in May, at the beginning of May. And so at that meeting is where our president-elect will become the new president, and I will switch into my role as past president at the close of that meeting. So you've got one more meeting where you have me chairing the meeting. This is going to be a hybrid meeting with the option to be in person or online, depending on your needs. So there's the date, Friday, May 2nd, and Saturday, May 3rd. We have not planned out the entire agenda yet. So if you're someone who has never been on a planning team for a regional council meeting and you really want to, please, by all means, speak to me about becoming part of the team that works together to plan our regional meetings. Those are the announcements that I had for today. And I'm just, there we go. I knew I would get to it. So I just want to take a moment to thank the people that have helped put this regional meeting together as we close the work portion of our fall meeting and look forward to the worship portion. I want to thank Wonder Chimvinga, Alex Jebson, and Ros Vincent Haven for responding to my call and working with me to deepen the theme of this meeting through worship. Our executive minister, Mark, for your support and patience as I struggled to get my mind wrapped around this meeting, and your help today, and for continuing the theme of you know what. Terry Smith, Chair of Agenda and Business, who even gave me his computer when mine froze up. Thank you. Max Watkinson, Executive Assistants, who stepped into the role of taking minutes as well for this meeting, and John Neff and Michelle Pettick as our techies. Every one of these people that I just named has fielded last-minute late-night emails from a frazzled president and extended understanding and grace to me, so I thank you. Thank you also to Gary Clark, first time working with me as a parliamentarian, and I hope not his last. Thank you also to our equity support team in Andrea Allen and Linda Roberts, and our chaplains Kevin Steeper and Rebecca Duncan. What a blessing to know support is available to anyone and everyone at our meeting today. Now I want to thank you each for your commitment and willingness to engage in the business that came before us, your honest and open questions, your heartfelt comments, your grace and your intention. I feel that we have succeeded in our goal of widening the circle of our community and of our impact. And so I thank you. I will invite Terry to unmute and make our, oh, sorry. I've just got to get on Zoom and mute myself.
Executive Minister Mark, I'm going to invite President-elect Rebecca to have the floor for a second, if it is okay, President Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. President-elect Rebecca Duncan. President Jennifer, I want to thank you on behalf of the executive and the members of the Regional Council at large for your kind, gentle, and focused leadership. Your continued dedication to your role of president in the face of great personal loss and change must not go unrecognized. We know how difficult that must continue to be. The way that you make people feel heard and acknowledged and recognize others' contributions is greatly appreciated. You help people feel like they are part of a greater whole. You remind us that we each play a role in the success of our congregations, not just our own, but each other's as well, in the success of our region and of our national church. Your leadership and vision for our church are incredibly valued, and your quest to focus us on our ability to communicate with one another is integral to the heartbeat of all our ministries. Thank you for your guidance, and I truly am very nervous to be stepping into your shoes next spring. I thank God for your leadership example and for your friendship, which I plan to rely on greatly as I take on the role of president next year. Bless you as you continue to venture into your own new normal, and I pray that you continue to feel supported by your community and all of us here at Western Ontario Waterways. Blessings, love, and light be yours.
Oh, thank you. Now you're going to make me cry. So I'll turn the floor over to Terry. Let's switch to closing motions.
Again, so it's my my honor to present the closing motion. I think it's proposal 10, but I don't know. I've lost track. So the issue is the work of the region continues. Our regional council continues during between regional council meetings. We must make clear how the work will continue. The regional council might trust any unfinished business, which I do believe there is any from today. Authorize the executive to fill any vacancies on the understanding that appointments will be confirmed at the next spring regional council meeting. Direct the executive to plan to convene the meeting, which was just announced, and entrust the executive and commissions with the responsibilities and authority of Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council in accordance with the manual of the United Church of Canada and the governance handbook of the Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council. That closed the meeting of November 16-17 meeting of the Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council at the close of the celebration of ministry service tomorrow, Sunday, November 17th. And this is from the executive. Do you have any, or from the executive minister? Do you have any? There we go.
Are there any questions for clarification? Any additions or changes people want made to our closing motions? You cannot give me any more jobs. Do we have a mover and a seconder for this? Terry Smith and Mark Laird will move and second this. Any debate? I'll call for the question. I'll close the vote. And it is carried. Now that the business of the meeting is complete, let us end our time together turning toward the still point of our circle in worship. I'll invite Wonder Chimvinga, Alex Jebson, and Roz Vincent Haven to be unmuted, but I believe we have slides for our closing worship today.
Hi there, it's Michelle, tech host speaking. John, if there's to be volume, we don't hear it.
No, there isn't. Wonder is going to start by talking.
Thank you.
Yep, no
Yeah,
problem. So
I was,
while those slides are going, Wonder, you can just start reading. Thanks.
thank you. I was waiting for the slides, so I'll invite you to join me as I read this poem, Drop a Pebble in the Water. Drop a pebble in the water, just a splash, and it's gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on, spreading from the center, flowing on out to the sea. And there's no way of telling where the end is going to be. Drop a pebble in the water. In a minute, you forget. But these little waves are flowing, and there's ripples circling yet. And those little waves are flowing to a great big wave have grown. You have disturbed a mighty river just by dropping in a stone.
Drop an unkind word or careless. In a minute, it is gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on. They keep spreading from the center as they go. And there's no way to stop them once you've started them to flow. Drop an unkind word or careless. In a minute, you forget. But there's little waves a-flowing, and there's ripples circling yet. And perhaps in some sad heart, a mighty wave of tears you've stirred, and disturbed a life was happy ere you dropped that unkind word.
Drop a word of cheer and kindness, just a flash and it is gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on, bearing hope and joy and comfort on each splashing, dashing wave, till you wouldn't believe the volume of one kind word you gave.
Drop a word of cheer and kindness, in a minute you forget. But there's gladness still a swelling, and there's joy a circling yet. And you've rolled a wave of comfort whose sweet music can be heard over miles and miles of water just by dropping one kind word. And so let us join in music, singing together deep in our hearts. Let us go from this virtual place, never doubting for a minute the impact of what we have done and said today on our lives, on our church, on our world. For it is the ripple effect of the love of God, the peace of Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit poured out upon each one of us this day and forevermore. Amen. And so let us sing as we leave. We are one, verse 4. And just one final reminder before we leave this virtual place, that if you can't join us in person tomorrow for the celebration of ministries, it will be live streamed on YouTube. It won't be here on Zoom. So don't try to use your Zoom link for our meeting, because that isn't where you will find it. But if you go to our website, the link for YouTube, which is where that will be live streamed, will be there, and you can join us virtually that way. It's under where the regional council information is, the regional council meeting information is. So thank you again, everyone, for your participation. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And I hope to see many of you tomorrow at the celebration of ministry service.